Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome back to Drums and Drams. My name is Cameron, and on tonight's episode, we're going to be taking a look at the very first Bookers to hit shelves here in 2021. This is Donohoe's batch. All right, so before we get to the actual tasting this evening, I wanted to talk quickly about Bookers, the brand, my experience with it, and also give you the rundown of this bottle in particular. So for those of you who have watched my channel before, you know I'm not a huge fan of nuttiness in my whiskey. In particular, that really dry peanut shell type note, something that just doesn't do it for me. But that comes with a little bit of a caveat, and that caveat is if the whiskey itself is known for its nuttiness, if that is really a dominant note in there, then I can get down with it a little bit more. And that's because I don't hate peanuts. You know, I don't actually hate nuttiness. What I hate is when a whiskey has so many other amazing qualities and then you get this weird, sharp, almost cheap tasting peanut note that dominates those other really beautiful, dark, rich notes. That's when it's like offensive to me. And a great example of that would be some of these Elijah Craig barrel proof releases. A121 is a little thin, a little nutty. Otherwise, I think it's a pretty decent bourbon. But I think the nuttiness can kind of overpower and outshine some of the other, better qualities of some of these whiskeys. But the Booker's brand is by and large reliant on at least some degree of peanut in the whiskey itself. I would say that 2020 was the year of the peanut for Booker's. Granny's batch was just like licking the inside of a barrel at a Texas Roadhouse. If you've ever seen those giant barrels full of peanuts, I mean, that was the most peanut that I've ever had in a whiskey, I would say. And I actually liked it, partially because I was kind of new to the Booker's line at that point, but also I knew what I was getting myself into. And as a peanut forward whiskey there, it was something that I love to eat with like vanilla ice cream or something else that can kind of counteract it and add a sweeter component. But it's not something that I reach for all the time, admittedly. So let's talk quickly about the 2020 Booker's fiasco before we get into this review. We had Granny's batch, which I said was a nut frenzy. We had Boston batch, which for me actually largely eliminated the nuttiness, and it had a pretty down-the-middle bourbon profile, but it just wasn't extraordinary, and just not a great batch, especially at the price point. Then we had the Pigskin Batch, which I actually don't own a bottle of, but I do have a sample here somewhere, and I might do a comparison between Pigskin and this batch on this review. I'm not even sure yet. I'm just going to kind of wing it when we get there. But Pigskin, for me, even just after trying the sample, has been my favorite Booker's of 2020. Now, recently, I did a Booker's blind bracket as a part of my weekly live stream, and I was able to taste 9 different batches of Booker's dating from 2020 back to 2015. And it revealed to me that the older Booker's batches are extraordinarily different. Higher quality, less nuttiness, more well-rounded. They taste older even if they aren't older, which is interesting. Basically, it's just better whiskey in my opinion, and I've heard this from a lot of different people. Well, doing that blind bracket confirmed all of those suspicions and rumors for me, but the unfortunate part is that the Booker's we're getting today is more expensive and not as good. And I'm hoping that this new batch, Donohoe's batch here, can sort of course correct and bring us back at least in the right direction of some of these Booker's batches from yesteryear. I think that's all I've got. Talked about nuttiness, talked about how good these former batches were. Oh, and the final thing, I guess, yes, in 2020, we only got 3 Booker's batches instead of the traditional 4. And that was just because they weren't happy with the bourbons that they were tasting and the stocks they were going to use in one of those batches. So, Pigskin Batch, the 3rd batch of 2020, hit in like late November, early December. And people were kind of wondering what was going on, but of course, those rumors have been confirmed by now, and we're going to go back to 4 batches per year, I think, at this point. So this batch, Donohoe's batch, is 62.65% ABV. It's pretty middle of the road proof for Booker's batches. It's a little bit lower than the 2020 releases, just by a couple tenths, really, I think. The age here is what is important for me. We're actually moving back up the age ladder, I guess. 6 years, 11 months, and 4 days. Some of these other batches that I've tried have been more along the lines of like 6 years, 4 months. And I know 7 months in whiskey time is kind of minimal, a little bit negligible. But hey, I'll take it. I'll take whatever we can get with these newer batches. I don't know if these are the barrels that were passed over last year when they weren't quite ready to be blended, or, you know, I don't really know what the stocks were here in terms of that. You know, you've got the little card here that tells you where all of the percentages came from in their warehouses. I'm not gonna read all of that for you, but I think that's all that I need to tell you. Let me go ahead and get a pour of this going, and we'll get to the actual tasting here. All right, so one thing I wanted to mention is that you can tell I've actually been drinking through this bottle quite a bit. I'm trying to get acclimated to sort of the flavor profile here, what I think of it. I've had it now for, I don't know, 3 or 4 days. I've probably had, yeah, 4 or 5 glasses of this, and I've been trying it in different glassware, you know, my glasses that I like to use. I've been trying it in more of like an open rocks glass, stemmed glasses with smaller volumes, to really try to get a feel for what's going on here, because it's confusing me a little bit. I feel like this whiskey has changed a lot over the last few days. It could just be me, but I think this whiskey is opening up and developing in a very interesting way here. All right, so last thing I'll say is that, yes, it is early March when I'm recording this video, so this batch is a little bit late. I think they're kind of known for that, though. So let's cross our fingers that we do still get 4 batches this year. Let's go ahead and smell this Donohoe's batch. Let's check it out on the nose here. So it's hot. I mean, this is a hot batch. When I first popped this bottle open and smelled it off the neck, poured my first dram of this whiskey, it was definitely ethanol forward. It's still hot, but it's not as offensive as it was. And right now I'm getting a lot of like nice aged notes from this whiskey. Now keep in mind, I'm recording this video at like 2 p.m. It's my first whiskey of the day. I don't have a comparison. There are good and bad things about doing it that way, but it's getting a really nice oak funk quality and leather quality here. Yeah, I mean, it's actually smelling like a really, really great bourbon right now. Some sharp baking spice in there, really down the middle bourbon profile, but it, to me, compared to Boston Batch, this is night and day different. This is much better. I did a comparison with Boston Batch the other night when I first cracked this open, and I like this significantly better. So even though both of those are pretty like down the middle, I would say this one definitely is outshining Boston Batch at this point. Yeah, and there is a little bit of nuttiness in here, but it is so layered in with everything else that I think it's totally okay, and it's like the perfect amount of nuttiness for a Booker's product in my mind. All right, so I'm going to put that down for just a second. When I first cracked it open, I was getting a ton of these really sweet notes, and it is a very sweet bourbon, and we'll check it out on the palate and see if that holds true. But one thing I wanted to do with this bourbon in particular is not write too many notes out. Like I usually have some bullet points in front of me on my computer down here. For this one, I really wanted to just kind of see what I got today, because it has been changing so much. It would be disingenuous to put up notes from the other night that really haven't held true any other day. I mean, it's changed as the days have gone on and as I really get acclimated to it. So I am as surprised as you guys are right now with kind of where this is going, where it's going to go. So I just wanted you to know that I have no idea what I'm going to say in this video. All right, let's get a taste of this. First sip is powerful, you know? Very, very sweet. I mean, like almost uncharacteristically sweet here for a Booker's. And I'm not mad about it. I actually kind of like it. Go back to the nose, you get tons of vanilla. The baking spice and vanilla notes in here are kind of contrasting, but they do a really good job of, you know, vanilla being sort of a lighter aroma or flavor, baking spice being sort of in the middle there, providing some of that oomph and that punch. especially with the young age of this whiskey and the fact that we're at barrel proof. One thing I am getting now, which is something that I was getting the other night, is almost like this strawberry, candied strawberry note in here. Because of all that sweetness I'm talking about and that vanilla, it's almost like this sort of strawberry shortcake, you know, that vanilla icing and strawberry combination there. I kind of like it, but it's not something that I can remember getting on any Booker's that I've ever had before. Almost bubblegum. That's kind of crazy. Almost bubblegum in here. A little bit of apple in there. Caramelized apple. Really, really solid. Like, it's like the epitome of a standard bourbon profile cranked up to barrel proof, but then also balanced out with some additional sweet notes that make this a little bit more interesting than a traditional Booker's, or I shouldn't say traditional Booker's, recent Booker's, because the traditional ones are freaking awesome. I'm almost reminded here in some ways of a Stag Junior, and I know you're going to think I'm crazy for saying that. No, I don't think this smells identical to a Stag Junior, but the sweet strawberry bubblegum candied qualities in here that you kind of have to separate from that standard bourbon profile, those qualities are reminding me almost of like that Stag Junior Batch 15 in some ways, because they're just so sweet. All right, one last sip. It's good. I mean, it's not amazing, but it's a good bourbon. I'm going to think about the finish now as we're getting through this. The palate development is long. I mean, the baking spice on this particular one, the sweetness, all of it just continues to blossom and come in waves in your mouth, right? Takes a long time to get into the finish here. As we do get into it, there's a really, really distinct oak funk in this. Like those older Knob Creeks, basically. Like that kind of an oak, sour, funky leather type thing. Like that's what I'm getting in the finish. The sweetness definitely hangs on in the palate, but it's matched with all of that spice. Of course, the finish down the back of the throat is crazy long with all of the Booker's young spice going on in there. Yeah. I like this. I think that for me, this is probably my favorite recent Booker's batch that I can think of. Definitely better than Granny's, definitely better than Boston. I'm going to do a side-by-side with Pigskin very, very quickly here, just to see like how these things stack up. But I think overall right now, this is a solid batch. It's not worth the price point in my eyes, as the Booker's price continues to go up. In Ohio, it's 85 plus tax right now. I know like in Michigan, it's $100 state minimum, I believe. I don't think it's worth that. You know, I'm still going to pick an Elijah Craig barrel proof over this any day of the week. Probably not Larceny barrel proof. I'd probably take this over Larceny, but the price differential is just, it's tough. It's tough because this is still increasing in price. All right, so we're going to go next to Pigskin now and see how these two batches compare. So over here I have the new batch, Donohoe's batch, excuse me. I got the old bourbon belches. And now we're going to Pigskin. All right, let's try Pigskin on the palate. I like Pigskin a lot. Pigskin has a little bit of a different profile here in terms of the fruity, sweeter components of the bourbon. Like, I think Pigskin might have a little bit more of that apple characteristic, whereas, and it's actually a little bit brighter overall, whereas this new batch, Donohoe's batch, a little heavier, a little spicier, but still with some of those strawberry, almost bubblegum, vanilla type notes. I've got to say, on the nose, Pigskin smells just a little bit more balanced to me. All right, let's take a sip of Donohoe's. Next to Pigskin, Donohoe's actually taste a little bit more traditional now. You get less of those sweeter characteristics that I talked about because Pigskin just has maybe even more sweetness that I wasn't aware of as compared to Donohoe's. Let's do one more sip of Pigskin. I think the moral of the story for me is that both of these are moving Bookers in the right direction. I hate to put them side by side and try to choose which one is best. They're just different. Pigskin a little bit brighter, a little more balanced. The proof actually seems less on Pigskin, even though I believe it's a little bit more. And then Donohoe's batch, by comparison, has a little bit more of that brown sugar, baking spice, traditional thing going on there. It's funny to me how bourbons can change when you side by side them next to something else. Like when I first tasted this Booker's and called out all of those sweet notes, and then they almost disappear when they're put next to the Pigskin batch. It's just interesting to kind of see what influences your palate, what an A-B side-by-side comparison will do to your mind when you're trying to figure out and dissect these things. So I'd be curious to know from all of you what you think about this, if you've done this side-by-side comparison or any comparisons like this where you have these batched products, Stag Jr., Booker's, Elijah Craig Barrel Proof, and have a hard time because the batches are so similar that they sort of blend together and make it hard to discern things. So I'd love to hear some of your feedback on that. For me, we are moving in the right direction with Booker's. I'm not going to totally break up with them yet or divorce myself from purchasing a future bottle of Booker's, unless of course the price continues to go up beyond $100 for me. Then we're gonna rethink that, you know. But I'm gonna be curious to see how this continues to develop, if we can get back to some of that glory of the former Booker's batches, Big Man Small Batch, Mama's Batch, Sip a While, Kitchen Table, like just some really solid batches that have happened over the last, you know, 4, 5, 6 years. I'm hoping that we're moving there, but I'm not sure yet. At any rate, this is a great sign, and it looks like we might be on our way. So I think that's all I've got for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you thought. Let me know if you've tried this new batch of Booker's. How much does it cost in your area? Because for me, it's 85 plus tax, and that is almost the limit. Go ahead and like the video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell notification so you can find out when new things come out or when I'm going live. If you have anything you want me to review, drop me a comment or send me an email, drumsanddrams@gmail.com. Otherwise, I'm gonna call it a day, and I'm gonna go ahead and end with my final sip of this brand new Donohoe's batch. So cheers to all of you, and I will see you next time on Drums and Drams.